think we'll get ready to get started here. Folks can continue to trickle in. But appreciate everyone coming out this morning. Welcome back. Hopefully everyone had a great and relaxing spring break and ready to kick off the second half of the semester. And no better way to do that than with a fantastic speaker that we have for you all here today. My name is Greg Dobson. I'm the Director of GIS and Engagement in NEMAC. We're an applied research center here on campus. And I've been doing GIS here on campus for over 17 years. A little bit in a silo. I mean, for the past 17 years, as long as I've been here, there's not been a lot of GIS going on here on campus outside of NEMAC and the classes that are offered in environmental studies. But over the last couple of years, there's been a growing interest in it, and part of that due to the National Humanities Grant that Dr. Ellen Pearson and myself and a team of others have been working on. And last spring, we offered a workshop here on campus to teach faculty how to use story maps and start to incorporate some of that into their classroom. So all of a sudden, there's this buzz that's building up, and it seemed like a great time for Joseph to come. I've known Joseph for over a decade. He and I met years ago out at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado. I've got a group of folks that I work with out there to develop GIS training materials for weather and climate professionals. So he and I got to know each other out there and got to talking about what goes on here at UNC Asheville. So it's a great time to bring him. Joseph Kersky, Dr. Joseph Kersky, he's a geographer. He has spent about half his career working for USGS and the U.S. Census Bureau. And for the last 17 plus years, he's been with ESRI, that's the Environmental Systems Research Institute. There was a misprint in this morning's WAG about that. But they are the global leaders in geospatial intelligence and mapping software. And they do a lot to support a plethora of different communities, including higher education. And so Joseph is the education manager for ESRI and spends his time working with groups like ourselves to make better use of all these tools. Joseph has a phenomenal background. He has produced or authored over 11 different books, 75 journal articles, over 1,000 blog essays. He's created 40 podcasts, over 6,000 videos, all in the name of GIS education.
Do not watch my videos. Don't torture yourself. Thanks, Greg.
But yeah, he spends his time visiting universities. He visits over 30 universities a year, so we're just really honored to have him with us here today. He'll be here tomorrow, too. We've got some meetings set up. In fact, we've got kind of office hours, if you will, this afternoon at 3:30 over in Highsmith, room 1927. If any of you all want to come by and talk a little more one-on-one with him, please do that this afternoon at 3:30. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Joseph, and he's going to hopefully enlighten your world about what GIS is. And I realize a lot of you in the room might not really know what GIS is. And I tell you what I like to tell folks is, and he can elaborate on this, what did you do when you got up this morning? Did you turn on the lights? Did you turn on the water? All of that is managed with GIS. Did Amazon deliver a package to your house over the weekend? That's GIS. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joseph.
Greg has said it all. Thank you, folks. That GIS really is all around us. And I would like to, in the next 3 hours that we have together, just kidding, we don't have 3 hours. Just wanted to make sure you folks were on your toes, that we can have a dialogue. We've got a nice small group here, even though this room seems kind of like the Wembley Stadium, but it's awesome. It's a great room. And I'd love to chat with you all, not just after the workshop this morning, but like Greg said, over the next few days. Also, I know one of you has already connected with me on LinkedIn, so I'm on LinkedIn. If there's ever anything I can do to help you in your geospatial journey, I don't mean the 80s band journey, I mean the geospatial journey that you all are on. Even if, like Greg said, you might not be taking a GIS course, you might not have GIS as a major part of your career, but you're going to be interested in the whys of where. You're going to be looking at change over time, whether it's in economics or data science or engineering or geo-BIM or interior space mapping or health or whatever other field you folks are ended up going into. Geospatial technology is going to, as Greg very well articulated, a part of your life. And so that's what we're going to sort of unravel here. And another reason why I wanted to come to your campus, and thank you for inviting me, And that is because you've got people like Dr. Ellen Pearson, you've got Drake Thomas over here in business, and others that are real leaders in using geospatial technology to enhance their research, enhance their teaching, enliven their instruction, engage the students in real issues. Because to me, geospatial technology is not about how to buffer a stream inside ArcGIS Pro 3.3. It's never about the tools. It's about this tool right here. This is the most important tool, right, Greg? Your spatially thinking, critical thinking brain. And that's what you want to, that's more than any other tool. That's what is the one that you want to nurture, if that makes sense. So you've got some real leaders here that are interested in using this in a cross-disciplinary way, which, let me just have a moment. That speaks near and dear to my geospatial heart. So again, thanks for having me, folks. Let's just chat briefly about why location as a framework for study. Well, we've got some serious issues on our planet, don't we? We've got ocean acidification, natural hazards, energy, water. What else are you folks interested in? What are some problems and issues that we need to solve here on our planet? Local to global scale.
Flooding and land loss.
Okay. Natural hazards of various kinds. What else?
Extinction.
Okay, so habitat loss, extinctions. Anything else on your minds? Everything else is good, right? Hey, no problems?
Sea levels.
Okay, so we've got climate, we've got inequities, we've got all kinds of local to global. All of them are the SDGs from the UN, right? All of those are spatial issues, and hence geospatial technology with spatial thinking can help us to not just understand how the world is, but to build a brighter and better tomorrow. Really, that's why we're all so passionate about geospatial technologies. Maps are representations of reality. They're very useful representations, but just let me illustrate with a data set that you have at your fingertips and something called the ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World. The Living Atlas of the World, which is a wonderful data library, and one of those layers in there is a whole series of natural hazards, one of which is the tornadoes layer from basically 1950 to 2023. So about 83 years of tornadoes. Very useful data set. It's about 70,000 tornado tracks. Notice that we have the touchdown point and the liftoff point for each one of those tornadoes. They're not straight lines in reality, right? They're sinuous. That's one of the reasons why they're so hazardous and so scary. We don't exactly know what path they're going to take. Also, the second thing, and this nudges on what I'm going to talk about today, and that is be critical of the data. You students don't believe everything you see on the web, right? Okay, you should also be critical of mapped data. Maps tend to be believed, which is a good thing, but also a very scary thought because everybody now is a map creator. It's not just the agencies that Greg talked about that I used to work for, USGS, Census Bureau, NOAA, Rand McNally, the National Geographic. Those were traditional science and map, the UK Ordnance Survey, etc. Those were traditional mapping and science agencies. And those people had the tools and the technology to create mapped content. Okay? Now, all y'all, ustedes, vous, tú, okay, you all are map creators now. Anybody can create content in this ArcGIS Online platform and other platforms. So that means that there's a lot of mapped content now available at your fingertips. Some of very good quality, some that are well documented with metadata. I never metadata I didn't like. Ooh, that was a bad pun. But the point is, some is well documented with you understand who created it, when it was created, how often it's updated, the scale it was created at, the map projection that was used, etc. But there's other content that looks good, but you don't really have a whole lot of information about it. So that's the world that we're living in. Everyone, including you all, is a creator of content, including map content. And that has huge implications for data quality, ethics, and other decisions that we're going to have to talk about today. So just as one last example of the tornadoes being representations of reality, very useful, but you need to be critical of them. And that is we've got, remember I said 1950s and 1960s, tornado data along with the 2010s, 2020s. Did we have Doppler radar back in the 1950s and 1960s? How do we know where those tornadoes were?
Didn't we just see them?
Observations. Hey, it struck that cornfield over there and it moved into this town and it struck this business. So it's anecdotal accounts. So we have a mixture of spatially very accurate and somewhere over in that field accuracy, all in the same data set. So all that is to say that you need to be critical of the data. So maps being representations, very useful representations, but I'm here to tell you fine students out there that mapping and geotechnologies, and think about this. In 2004, the U.S. Department of Labor said there are 3 hot growing fields for the 21st century: nanotechnologies, biotechnologies, and geotechnologies, including geographic information systems, remote sensing, looking at the world from drones, UAVs, aircraft, satellites, etc., LiDAR data, and so on, others, Landsat data, so remote sensing, and also GPS, or more broadly, global navigation satellite systems. So those 3 things are the geotechnologies. There are 3 hot growing fields for the 21st century. And geotechnologies truly gives you students superpowers. They really do. And they're also tied to real this is me out in the field. This is pretty geeky and nerdy. 36 north, 107 west. Where the actual latitude and longitude lines cross. Why would I be in the middle of a field in New Mexico? That's part of the reason why we're here. We're very bound to place and space. Fu Tuan, University of Wisconsin. Topophilia. We are very place bound. Think of all the artwork. Think of all the songs. Think of all the poems. You're a humanities person, right? You could probably talk about dozens, hundreds of these things that are bound to place and space. You could probably right now start sketching out on a pad of paper your childhood neighborhood. Could you not? At a very high resolution, where your friend's house was, where that mean dog was, where you floated logs down a stream, etc. That vacant lot, the way you took to school or to the public library, right? You've got a very detailed map of your childhood roaming space. And indeed, Richard Louv talks about that in Last Child in the Woods. We need to get students out there while they're young people, because otherwise we have what's called nature deficit disorder. And we'll talk more about that. But Richard Louv, L-O-U-V, articulates that very well in that Last Child in the Woods book. So the point is, we are very place and space bound. We need to get out there on the landscape. We need to develop this earth ethic if we're going to solve these pressing issues of our 21st century world, and we need to use geotechnologies. Now, I just submit to you all, and I alluded to this a few minutes ago, that you all are real leaders here at UNC Asheville. I salute you all, and I look forward to further conversations. At the end of this presentation, I'm not going to say, live long and prosper, map on, and we'll see you. No, I'd love to have this continuing dialogue. I visit about, as Greg very graciously talked about 35 campuses a year face-to-face, as well as probably 100 webinars and online sessions. And from that gathering of conversations, I really hear about what the challenges are out there in education. I salute you all for embarking, you students, in this fine institution to further your geospatial and your other journey, and you faculty that are really pushing the boundaries. That to me is what geospatial technology is. It doesn't fit into this disciplinary box. It was really meant to be interdisciplinary, starting with where Roger Tomlinson, the very first GIS in Canada, back in Ottawa in 1967. Hey, let's look across layers. And we can't do this with paper maps. We got to have this system. Let's call it a GIS, where we can look across layers so we can see how the lithosphere is connected to the atmosphere, is connected to the biosphere, is connected to the anthroposphere, right, the human sphere, and knowing that if we alter something over in this sphere, it's going to impact some variables over here. So it's always been about interdisciplinary breaking down barriers between departments on a campus and also in society, kind of a tool, okay? So you are all leaders here, and I salute you. And think about this. What made you get to this point in your career? In full confession, this is what I did as a teenager. Nobody else liked to do this in my circle of friends. I drew maps on big poster board. I even had numbers in the margins of my maps. What were the margins on the right side or on the east side of this map? The 3500 North Block, the 4200 North Block. What are those? Address ranges, the 100 block, the 200 block, the 300. What kid knows about address ranges? What kid cares about address ranges? But the point is, you like to do things as a young adult, etc., as a mid-career student, whatever stage of life you're in, that nobody else maybe likes to do. That's okay, embrace that. Make that a part of your own journey and the value that you're going to bring to your future workplace, whether it's a nonprofit, government, business, academia, right? That's part of your unique story. So in my case, okay, nobody else liked to make maps. That's okay. I love doing it, and I still love making maps. Now, Greg talked about this, and I'm not going to bore you with my own background, but I want to share two different things to encourage you. One, you don't have to stay at the same organization your entire career, as my journey has shown. I've been in nonprofit, academia, government, private industry. And the second thing I'm hoping this encourages you is that spatial thinking, remember this tool being the most important, and geotechnologies on your tool belt is going to be valuable no matter where you go in society and no matter what workplace you're going in. So I'm hoping that's encouraging in two ways. Another thing that in chatting with some of you before the workshop and hearing about what you're concerned about makes me think of the following. There are some things that happened in your past, a book you read, a field trip you went on, a mentor, a family member, a teacher, a professor, that influenced you in a positive way to bring you to this moment in this classroom that we're in right now. For me, someone talked about habitat. It was reading the Last Great Auk, AUK. Those magnificent flightless birds that swam from Iceland to North Carolina. Hey, North Carolina, the Outer Banks and back every year. I would get to the end of that book, and it was basically an account of the last of the group of the last great auks. And I knew it was going to be 1842, and I knew the last two adults would be clubbed and their egg smashed off the coast of Iceland. And I got to the end of that book every year as a middle school student and said, this is so wrong. How can we let this that was the last day. That was the last of the species. Can I do something about it to make a better world? I know that sounds not too far off of what brought many of you to this moment, right? You've had some key people, events, etc., books in the past that have brought you to this moment. And I'm here to tell you that geospatial technology is a tool that can be used to make a more resilient, more equitable, more sustainable world. That's why we use GIS technology. There's always a higher, more noble goal. It's never about just the tools. So sometimes people send me their URLs. Hey, Joseph, I've got my data mapped. And I'll say, that's great. And? Why do I say and? Because it's never just about mapping things. Yes, we love the mapping tools. They're pretty fun to use. They're pretty fascinating. Right, Greg? Pretty cool stuff. But there's always a bigger goal, right? How do you understand something, whether it's the community garden, the water quality, the habitat, etc., in a deeper, more richer way? And then, I'm just going to nudge you one more level forward. What action can you take to make the urban greenway a reality, or to make more affordable housing, whatever you're passionate about, right? There's an action component, and hopefully that leads to additional questions and additional investigations and additional action. Right? It's never just about the tools. So we feel pretty challenged nowadays, not just empowered by these tools, not just with COVID, but with some of you were touching on natural hazards and other things that make us feel, yes, we've got good people, we've got good tools, we've got good networks, but we also feel a little bit vulnerable in our society. We've got 8 billion humans impacting the planet in various ways, for one thing, among many other forces acting on our planet. But I'm here to tell you that I'm very encouraged because GIS is behind nowadays all sciences, from archaeology, anthropology, astronomy, all the way to zoology and everything in between. It really is fundamental to all scientific action and decision making and knowledge generation. It really is. I brought a few of these books with me today, the Women in GIS book and other books that hopefully will be inspiring to you all. Another thing that I want to mention here is that we have a I'm going to pop this out in a separate tab. We have a chief scientist at Esri. I think many years ago people wondered, you know, Joseph, you're at a software company. Why do you have a chief scientist? Well, because GIS is behind all sciences, and Dr. Wright, Dawn Wright, who is an oceanographer, geographer, she taught for many years at Oregon State University, and she's our chief scientist. Last summer, she went down into the deepest part of the world, which is where? Where's the deepest trench? The Marianas Trench. What did she find at the bottom? The first time they shone a light at the seafloor, and this wasn't her first time at the bottom, but last summer they went, she and a group of 3 or 4 other scientists, they found not a rare sea creature that had never been seen before, but a beer bottle at the bottom of the deepest trench. That was a pretty sobering moment. It touches on what we were talking about. We have a huge impact on our planet. We don't want to see a beer bottle at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, do we? I think another thing that people wondered about several years ago, before 2020, is why does Esri have a health team? And now that everybody on the planet, at some point in the last 4 years, has seen the JHU COVID dashboard, that was all built on ArcGIS technology, which is the same technology that you folks have here on your campus at your fingertips. That is a dashboard, and you can create dashboards. We might talk about that later on today. But I think there's 5 reasons why GIS skills are critical to science. You can read these as well, but part of it is crowdsourcing. So for example, I've got a walkability map that touches on the themes that we're talking about right now. It is a map tied to a survey, a field survey, tied to a dashboard, tied to a story map. And so in this story map, and by the way, the whole presentation is actually a story map as well. It's a multimedia story map. This isn't my computer. I shared it with the world. You can look at it later on. Hopefully take a deeper dive into it, and then you can email me. It's Saturday night, Joseph. I'm looking at your story map. And I'll say, that's great, but remember to have a work-life balance. Anyway, the point is, this is another story map. It's about walkability. Now, you folks are passionate about many things, and I am as well. Are these photographs, are these walkable places or not? This is what I encounter a lot in the field, right? This kind of thing, you're on a sidewalk, it ends, there's a drop-off, there's a railroad track, etc. This is probably the most famous intersection in the world right here. Where is this? Abbey Road. It's not very walkable, actually. There's no traffic light there, so you have to have a friend or a loved one say, hey, stop or slow down, my friend is crossing and we're taking a photograph. So it's actually not very walkable. There are lots of neighborhoods that are walkable, in my opinion, but have no sidewalks. So there's all kinds of nuances to walkability. But in this story map, I talk about what's walkability, why do communities care about it, for aesthetic reasons, for health reasons, for economic reasons, etc. For heat resilience reasons, with tree cover, etc. And inside my story map, I have a survey called ArcGIS Survey 123. It's another tool that you have at your fingertips as part of this Esri ArcGIS platform. And in Esri land, it's sort of like McDonald's, where everything starts with McSomething. In our company's GIS, it's our own brand of GIS. And another thing that you could maybe share at a future event, party, or something. Hey, do you know why it's called ArcGIS rather than just GIS? It's our own brand of GIS, and there is a geeky story behind that I can share sometime. But in my survey, I have basically 5 questions. Is this place walkable? Rate the walkability, tick all the characteristics. Where is it located, which is germane to our discussion right now. And then do you have a photograph of it? And then, as you probably would suspect, I have a web map where I and others have submitted a survey point to that survey. Now, I'm the author of that survey. I can leave that survey on as long as I want to, and it's an open survey. You could actually participate in it right now. And then I have a dashboard, just like the dashboard in your car. These dashboards give you a one-screen snapshot, if you will, with a live feed. In my case, I've got a live feed for my survey. And notice, if I zoom into your beautiful part of the world, look at this. Ooh, I've got a green pedestrian symbol. The green means walkable. Okay, these are the points that I collected this morning. Nice, what a great campus. The point is, you could use the same tools. Well, there's 2 points. One, You could use these same tools easily. Every one of these components, the survey, the story map, the web map, and the dashboard, we're not talking weeks, months, years to set those up. They're all configurable drag and drop apps. Do I want the pie chart in the upper right? Yes. Do I want the indicator here? Do I want the bar chart over here? There's a bit of a mid-swimming pool, touching a few toes and maybe the tops of the kneecaps type of immersion here, where I've got a little bit of code behind the scenes to make those sorted lists that you see there and a reverse sort on those. But maybe a 4 or 5 line Python script there in something called Arcade. Remember I said everything pretty much starts with Arc in the Esri world. But the point is, you could do the same thing. So there's 2 points. Every one of those 4 components took me maybe a couple class periods to create. So the whole thing was maybe 10 hours to create this whole thing. Second point is that the maps and the apps are interconnected. Now, you and I have a lot of tools on our phones, on our computers, on our various devices that basically do one thing, correct? The power here, and that's fine. They do them and they do them well, and that's why we use them. The power here is that you have at your fingertips. It's just amazing what you have, the power that my precious, that you have at your fingertips with these tools being connected. So that the story map has the survey in it and it has the dashboard. And so now I've shared this out. All I need is my story map, and you can understand the whole walkability issue a little bit better than you did before, and maybe even participate in my survey. And I think that, okay, I'm just going to leave you with this third point about this, and that is that you could use these same tools to do something, study something that you're passionate about. Community art, community gardens, water quality, weather, soil moisture, heat energy loss in buildings, recycle bins, whatever you're passionate about, you could use these same tools. So Survey 123 is just like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms that you've probably used in the past. It's just drag and drop, but the power here is that it instantly becomes, and this is slightly geeky, a editable feature service. Okay, it's just a layer. It's just a layer inside this WebGIS platform. And WebGIS was a huge leap forward, by the way. That's why I've got WebGIS being a paradigm shift for GIS. We were chatting with Greg and the NEMAC folks a while back, and some of us go way back to the 20th century with GIS, when it was very much standalone workstations. Dr. Ellen as well. Standalone workstations. Really hard to share data out of that. Why was WebGIS so transformational? Because we want to be able to collaborate. All these pressing issues of our time require the economists working with the ecologists, right? Working with the social scientists, etc. We want to be able to collaborate cross-disciplinary in cross-disciplinary ways, because these issues don't stop at political borders, they don't stop at ecological borders, they don't stop at disciplinary borders, right? They transcend all those things. So while it's great that you have documents in the cloud, right? Remember when you first started using Google Drive and OneDrive and Dropbox, and wow, now I can collaborate with a classmate on a project and on a paper I'm working on. Remember the first time you started using your music in the cloud? Maybe for some of you, that's always been your scenario. You've always had ABBA's greatest hits online in the cloud. ABBA was a band, okay? The point is, in the past, it was like, how do I get this data and share it? How do I get this music to be shared? GIS in the cloud is even better than your docs online and your music online, in my opinion, because of these pressing, complex issues. Now, GIS, just like the world, is always going to be a little bit inherently complex because the world is complex, right? We've got lots of things that we really barely even understand. Even the long-studied San Andreas and other fault systems that branch off the San Andreas in Southern California. That's not really fully understood, how all those little interconnecting subplates work together. Okay, so the world is complex. GIS is still a system, but it is vastly more approachable than ever before. In the past, and I don't have any, we've got a bunch of books here. Look at this. I've got props. Here, now you go learn GIS with this big stack of manuals and we'll see you. And you almost had to put your regular career on hold and decide, do I want to be an ecologist, a city planner, or a GIS person? I'm kind of exaggerating there, but that's kind of the way it was for many years. GIS was so all-consuming because it was very, very arduous and a long process to really fully get into. Now, there are many people like Greg and the NEMAC folks and others in here and myself that GIS is a major part of our job. But I've never actually had the title of GIS manager, GIS analyst. I've been adjunct instructor, educator, education manager, cartographer, geographer. And that's going to be true for most of you here. You're not going to have GIS in your title, but if it's another piece of your toolkit, like many of you are probably really interested in the environment in your new climate science program here, which is awesome. That I am too. I'm very passionate about that. But guess what? Being passionate about climate or the environment is not really going to be making you a valuable employee to EPA or the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality or wherever you end up working. But having geospatial technology as a tool and a perspective right here that you can bring to your organization is going to make you a lot more valuable and at the same time allow you to pursue those career passions that you folks have. I wish I could get excited about this. I'm just not as excited about it as I should be, huh? You're probably texting your professor saying, Joseph, this is the most boring presentation I have ever heard. I'm trying to figure out when I can go to the dentist next. When could I set up that appointment for my oral surgery? No, hopefully you're not doing any of that. Hopefully you're saying, oh my gosh, I had no idea this was so approachable and yet so important to our society. So let me just give you a couple of examples of investigations with geotechnology. You and me making maps, sometimes it feels like you and me making maps. This is being recorded. Oh my gosh, I better stop on the songs. Okay, let's do 6 short investigations with geotechnology. How about this? Ooh, the Wayback Imagery. You've got terabyte loads of satellite imagery at your fingertips. So right here, I'm going to go swipe, and I'm going to say, oh, I want 2014 on the left side, and this is just a web mapping app. You can create your own web mapping applications with this swipe tool. So at one glance, we see, okay, semi-arid area, I've got a lot of growth here. I've got a big IKEA store here where a couple years back it was basically cholla and some rattlesnakes and some field mice. The point is we've got a major issue, not just in, where is this? Las Vegas. Thank you very much. Exactly, Las Vegas. So at one glance, this is the power of mapping. We can see the issues. Okay, and if I scroll out and scroll over to this big water body over here, what is this? Greg, you're not allowed to answer these questions. No, that's okay. All good. But see, at one glance, look, I've got this island now it was an island in the past, linked to the mainland by this road, but now it's completely connected. So the water level is going down. I like to think of these tools and these perspectives as what's where, why is it there, and why should we care. Thank you. See, I've been wanting to come here for years. You folks you're warming the geo heartstrings. Exactly. Why should we care if communities don't have enough surface water and or they're mining the groundwater and the groundwater levels are decreasing? So what? How are we going to make sure that cities and other areas, agriculture, etc., are going to be able to be sustainable into the future when we've got these sorts of even one issue, urban sprawl water? But with the same tool, you could look at coastal erosion, glacial retreat, reforestation, deforestation. Because you have what I call level 1, you have these web mapping applications at your fingertips. But level 2, you can take the data into your ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Pro for further analysis. You can add mean annual precipitation. You could add rate of population change. You could add soil type. You could add a lot of different variables, not just because you can, but because it might provide you with further insights. And then you could also have access to the analytical tools that are associated with those tool kits, ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Pro. So that's just one of many of these web mapping applications. We chatted with the NEMAC folks an hour ago about drought quite a bit. This is the water balance and drought aware apps that are out here. GIS for climate. I just invite you to check out some of these things. Land cover change. At one glance, with the Sentinel-2 satellite imagery, I can see what the land cover change is for Asheville and surrounding areas at one glance, level 1 in the web mapping application. Then I can take the data, once again, because it's all as data as services online, I can take that into my fully analytical GIS package for further analysis. It's just the best of both worlds. It really is. And so this is just one way of showing you the power of GIS. Let me show you another way. let's take some data that you've actually mapped in the field. It could be walkability, it could be, in my case, I've got litter data. Okay, so I've got the litter data here. And let's say, that's great, Joseph, but I can hardly see those little gold dots. Okay, let's go over here to the styles. Yep, let's just go up here and say, I want to map the types of litter that I gathered. So I'm gonna get the plastic. Okay, I'm going to map plastic. So smart mapping kicks in and says, okay, one variable, I'm gonna give you a graduated circle map, a graduated symbol map. Can I change the color? Yes. Can I change the symbol style to a triangle or to a piece of, a more of a indicative graphic? Yes, I can do all that. So with one click, I've got a graduated circle or graduated symbol map. What if I added all of the litter variables? Okay, let's do that. I've got a couple of other things that I gathered out in the field. Plastic, paper, glass, aluminum, and other. Okay, I'm going to add all those. And now I'm going to get a predominance map. Now this is really tiny for those of you in the back. So I'm going to bump up the style. I'm going to go Style Options, and I'm going to grab this little pencil, right? And I'm going to bump up the size here so you can see it in the back. Okay, great. Now, this is all powered with JavaScript 4.x, so it's instant gratification. As I change things on the map, you see it instantly, those changes, even before I say done, even before I say save. That's the beauty, the wonder, the power of this. Okay, now I've got two things. The darkness of the color, what type of litter is predominant at each point, and then the color, what type of litter is predominant at each point. And now let's go one level deeper because you're, again, the UNC Asheville community, and I want you to get your full benefit from this workshop. Let's go to charts and size. Oh, now I've got a pie chart map. Now I can really see that upper northeast point was predominantly plastic. It's almost half of the total amount of litter there was plastic. Okay, fascinating. Let's go one more level, and then let's just change that slightly from pie to, let's drag, now I've got a ring or a donut chart. There are few rules in cartography and GIS. There's lots of guidelines. Is this better or worse than the predominant map, or better or worse than the pie chart? It depends on which one of these do you think helps you understand something better or deeper, and then maybe to inspire the community to use this inside a story map or a dashboard or an infographic or a video to say to the community, okay, here's the situation. Do we need more recycle bins? I'm doing too much GIS and not enough work-life balance because there's a baseball team that plays down here in San Diego. What is that team? The Padres, thanks. Okay, so do we have an incentive? I know there's issues bringing in your own containers to games, but do we have some sort of action item to the community saying, if you bring your own container into the game and you're not buying a bunch of plastic that's one use, do we offer you a discount in the game? I don't know, think creatively, but the point is always then to take action, right? Not just to map the litter. But there's two things here, nudging you into the action piece, but also the ease of mapping. I just had a spreadsheet, right? I just had a spreadsheet with latitude, longitudes. It could have been a street address. And then I've got it inside my, in this case, ArcGIS Online. And with a couple clicks, if I hadn't been talking so much, a couple clicks, you would have been able to do that. Style, change the options. Okay, try a pie chart, try a multivariate map, etc. Ooh, so again, the power that you have at your fingertips. This operation, getting the data onto a map, symbolizing it, classifying it, was, I'm not going to talk for hours, in the old days of GIS. No, this would have taken hours, maybe days, to do just what we did in a few minutes. So the standard project, right, you've got X amount of time, staff, hours. The preparation, the mapping part was like 70, 80, 90% of a typical project, leaving you precious little time to do the analysis and assessment and to gather stakeholders and to communicate the results. And now that the data preparation is shrinking in part because of generative AI tools that we could also talk about, the time for analysis and communication is widening, which is a good thing. Yes, okay. So that's another demonstration of the power that you have at your fingertips. And guess what? This whole thing is a story map, so you can actually go into that live map, right, and do exactly what I did at your own pace. Now there's a couple of forces that I think are bringing us to this pivotal moment. One of them is what we touched on at the beginning of the time today, and that is the awareness of issues of climate, equity, hazards, etc. are growing in society. It's no longer just our community talking about this, right? I'm a lot of times on airport shuttles, right, or trains or buses, or etc., and I hear people talking about this. That's good. The awareness is growing. They don't always connect it, the general public doesn't always connect it to geotechnologies and spatial thinking, but that's where our communication comes in. And people are enabled, as Greg talked about at the beginning, about, okay, you've had a package delivered, you had Uber. Who out there has a fitness app with your walks, your runs, your cycle rides, etc.? Okay, that's all geotechnology enabled, right? Those maps that you get from that. And then storytelling, the lower right-hand hexagon there, that's what I'm doing right now. Maps have been used to tell stories for centuries, right? The Chinese maps on silk, the Babylonian clay tablets, Al-Idrisi's map on 2 big plates of silver in the 1100s, that would have been a hard map to fold. Get it? It was on 2 big plates of silver. The point is, though, maps have been long used to tell stories. And then in the 20th century, on to copper plates that were then reproduced into paper maps, and then in our own century, in the digital form, lending us a lot more volume, but also, as I touched on, also societal issues that we need to chat about. And I know this sounds super boring, but the Spatial Reserves data blog and book. Oh my gosh, Joseph, how boring can you be? A book about data? The point is, it's all about 3 things. Where do I find spatial data for my project or for my teaching? And secondly, how do I know if it's any good? And I've talked to Dr. Ellen and others about the ethical implications. It's never just an impartial, objective piece of technology. All the decisions that you make, from the map projection that you use to the colors that you use, the symbols, the classification method, the communication methods, it's all a decision based on people's backgrounds and their perspectives. So it's laden with ethical decisions. And then the third thing that this Spatial Reserves is about, and I put a new essay out there every week, is about these ethical issues. So I encourage you to take a look at this sometime. Be critical of the data. Remember that we talked about earlier. One example is another trend in GIS is we want to map things now or as close to now as possible. So here's one example. I know it gets hot in Texas, but this was a data feed that was in our library that we got from a climate feed, a weather feed. The only thing that's normal is the pressure. The wind is way off the scale, for those of you that can read this in the back. My gosh, it's incredible. So the point is, I captured this as a screenshot before it was corrected. But it was online for a whole year. So if you were making an interpolated surface of wind, humidity, temperature, you'd have a big spike at Cleburne, Texas, if you weren't critical of the data. So even the data feeds, as wonderful as it is to have this at your fingertips, you need to be critical of them. They could be in error. The sensor could be off. Whatever. The feed was wrong. Whatever the issue was, I don't know. And this is just down the road from my favorite place name in Texas, which is Waxahachie, Texas. This is in Cleburne, Texas. But anyway, be critical of the data. Even these data feeds can be in error. Okay, folks? All right. So here's another example that I just wanted to get you thinking about in terms of the power that you have at your fingertips. Another personal issue, right? Maybe it's affected your family, it's affected my family. Traffic accidents. Okay, so in the past, we could do this kind of thing. We could make graphs, we could make these web and static maps of data showing the accidents, who was involved, the time of day of the week, etc. We could symbolize these in different ways. Now remember what I was chatting with you a moment ago about, we are in this phase 2 of GIS, no longer just replicating what we did with paper maps in a digital form, but actually exploring new horizons. So also thinking about what I was saying before, that you've got in any project a constraint on budget, staff, time. And so if you had your charge was at a certain county emergency management agency, let's say, to say, okay, we can only focus this fiscal year on certain intersections that are causing us the most traffic accidents. Let's combine GIS with a statistical package, R, Stata, SAS, etc., and find out the statistically significant intersections, consistently significant accidents. So we use the GIS to make a smarter decision. We're extruding, so that's kind of a neat GIS-y thing, but more importantly, we can identify those intersections. I want intersections that are these extruded hexagons that are consistently red hexagons, all stacked on each other. That's what we're going to use this year. And if we can reduce the accidents in there, then hopefully we'll have some time to address some of the other intersections in the city. So that's going beyond what we did before in new ways because we have these powerful GIS capabilities at our fingertips. All right. Couple of last points here. How much time do we have? We got hours left. No, we only have about 10 minutes. I want to leave some time for questions. But I promised some folks here that I talk about some trends happening in the world of geospatial technology. One of which, one of our colleagues here in the congregation here today is actually immersed in, and that is the touching, maybe not the total merging, but the touching between the people that traditionally did the interior space mapping and the people that did the exterior space mapping. The interior space mapping were always the people in CAD and BIM, computer-aided drafting and design, building information management, mapping interior spaces like this room, buildings on campus, rooms in a hospital, etc. And the people doing outside census tracts, watersheds, soil types, and those were the GIS people traditionally. In the past, it was sort of, these people were speaking Espanol and these people were speaking Portuguese. You know, we sort of understood, bom dia and buenos dias. I mean, we sort of understood a few words in common. But we didn't really talk to each other because we were totally in different platforms. And now that's starting to change with tools like ArcGIS Urban, City Engine, and some other tools that are bridging that, which makes sense, right? Because if we want to have a resiliency plan for a campus like this or a hospital or something like that, even a major part of the community, and there's a weather event at 3 p.m. on a Friday, where are the students? Where are the emergency shelters? We have to have all that stuff mapped, right? As well as for the electric lines and the water lines and campus safety and all the rest of it. So that's one trend. Another one I already touched on, and that is real-time data. And that touches on the phrase I have at the top of this section of the story map. Haven't all the maps been made? Well, no. They haven't all been made. I get this question a lot. Hey, Joseph, you've been mapping your whole career. Haven't all the maps been made? What's the big deal about mapping? Well, we want to map things in higher resolution, right? That 1 meter resolution data might not work for it will work for my walkability map, but it's not going to work for soil types here versus there. I know some people doing studies of cemeteries. This headstone is different from a different location from that headstone. They have to have high resolution GPS, but also high resolution imagery, maybe from UAVs or drones. Okay, so we want to map things in higher resolution, in finer detail, map things we've never mapped before. We need a higher resolution map of Mars. We need higher resolution maps of the interiors of people's bodies. The human brain, medical mapping is a huge frontier in mapping. Okay, and what about, we want to map things in real time, wildfire perimeters, flooding, as you touched on earlier, traffic, crime, etc. So we want to map things that we've never mapped before and also at a higher resolution and at near real time or as close to real time as possible. So those are just a few of the many reasons why all the maps have not been made, and we want to use them in infographics, dashboards, and other new ways of communication, because maps have always been powerful ways of communication. And that touches again on the ethics issue. That is, when you're making these web maps, and remember, all y'all are map publishers, you're data publishers. Be careful and thoughtful about how you're communicating with those maps and the scales and the classification method they're using, etc. Okay, so when I work with the business professors, and we were chatting over here with one of your fine business professors, do I drag those business students into all the geospatial fundamentals that Greg and I love talking about? No, but if they're going to make a map at some point and do a study on potential shipping routes across the Arctic, okay, you probably shouldn't use the Web Mercator map projection. You should probably use something called the polar projection. Why? Because your measurements are going to be more accurate then. You're not going to have distortion. So it's a way of gently dropping in some of those elements, but I don't front load all of that with these other disciplines into, you have to know how to build a geodatabase, you have to know how to document metadata, and all that traditional GI science stuff. No, because they don't really need to know all of that except for when it becomes an issue or something that they need to deal with. So those are just a few trends in GIS. I'm going to talk about AI ever so briefly. We have tools, for example, that are in ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Pro, and there's also QGIS, and there's Leaflet and Mapbox and other GISs that are starting to engage with some of these generative AI tools as well. One of the tools that we've had for about a year and a half now is a set of feature extraction tools. So you get imagery, and you can extract using AI all, or not actually all, 98 or 99% of all the buildings, the light poles, the vehicles, the trees, etc., from that image. That's great because a lot of the GIS work in the past was manually gathering all of that information. That was what the bulk of many people in city and county governments, for example, did. They gathered for years all the fire hydrants and all the parcels, and that was their sort of bread and butter work. And that's radically transforming those jobs into jobs I think are more interesting. So that's wonderful. It also requires you still to use this tool right here because it doesn't extract all of the features. So you need to manually think about what are they not capturing and how do I manually collect those. Okay, we also have, just as one more example, I talked about Survey 123. That survey tool that I use to gather the walkability data, right? Simple form-based tools, you're dragging and dropping. There's thousands of tree surveys. There's thousands of trash surveys out there. There's thousands of water quality and noise and other surveys, right? In ArcGIS Online now, you can go to Survey 123 and with a voice prompt say, I want a tree survey. And it'll generate now, with these generative AI tools, a basic tree survey. Do you like question number 3? No? Okay, great. Discard it and put your own in. But it'll do a lot of those core, every one of them has got a tree height, a tree species, a tree condition kind of a question. You don't have to spend time generating all that yourself. You can spend more time on the questions that are really personal or germane to your study alone. So it's just two ways. Now on the other side, maybe not other side, but on the cautionary side, as you know from my Spatial Reserves data blog, which I'm sure you're going to look at daily now. Now, it's basically my mom and I look at that. Nobody else looks at that Spatial Reserves data, but I hope it's valuable to you. But as you know from me touching on that I'm very keen on having people be critical of the data. And so as we gradually get into, not so gradually, actually pretty rapidly get into this modality in GIS where a lot of the tools are actually AI driven, I want people to understand what's in those models. I really do. If there's metadata in those models, do people understand the metadata? Are they looking at the metadata, or are they just click, click, click on the models because the models are so wonderful? Be critical of the tools. As we get into this, I think we just need to be, again, just thinking carefully and thoughtfully about how we're using the tools. It's wonderful that they're there, but be thoughtful about using them. Okay, I'm going to skip now to a couple guidelines for you students learning this stuff. Don't stop at the map. I talked about that earlier. Don't just put your data on the map and say, hey, Dr. Allen, here's my story map on the narratives for all the wonderful settlement over the past 200 years of Asheville and then centuries before with the indigenous population. Don't just map stuff. What insights now do you have? What action items, if any, do you have? And don't get too attached to the tools. This is a doorstop in a high school that I was running a geotech club after school. Some of you may know what this is. What is this? It's an old Mac. Awesome. And it was at one time, probably what, $2,000 or $3,000 back in the late 1980s to buy one of these things. Now it's a doorstop. Don't get too attached to the tools. The tools are wonderful, but remember this tool right here. And then finally, all 3 legs of the geoliteracy stool matter. You students out there, focus on something and get really deep into your chosen passionate area of content, whether it's water or energy or something else, okay? But don't lose sight of this holistic view that we need to solve these world problems and local to global issues that we talked about earlier. And finally, the geographic perspective, the holistic view of these ecospheres, biospheres, et cetera, interconnecting is really important in what we need in society. We've had a lot of decades where people are very focused on their own thing and they're not really thinking about altering the variables over here. So please remember those. The last thing I wanted to share with you all is a couple of tips that I think are, I've got some tips for faculty in here. The most important skills for students going forward. Be curious about the world. Ask questions. Ask questions that your professor's not even asking you to ask. Ooh. And when you get into the workplace, ask questions that your supervisor is not even asking you. Why are we doing it this way? What if we, okay. Those are very valuable employees to us at Esri. We have about 8,000 employees. And so be curious. Leads you to be tenacious, solve problems, etc. Being able to work with data, wide variety of data. And that's another reason why I love geospatial technology. You're using a wide variety of data. And be critical of that data. Know some of your geographic and geotechnical foundations, map projections, symbology, classification, etc. Be adaptable and flexible. I love this Ikigai diagram from the Japanese. What are you good at? What does the world need? What can you be paid for? And what do you love to do? Am I at the center of these intersecting circles every day on the job? No, but we spend a lot of time in our career. And so pick something that, if you have to work late, working on a project, you're not constantly watching the clock. That's my advocacy. And the other thing, second last, read. Read outside of your discipline even. Great conversation starter at parties and at conferences. Hey, what are you reading these days? Nice thing to talk about. Also, I've gotten so many collaborative efforts with faculty and others over the years from talking about what we have in common that we're reading. Okay. And also ideas for curriculum. I'm in education, so curricular ideas from things that I've read. And then finally, cultivate your communication skills. At some point, the world we live in, you're going to be asked, hey, you got to come down to the CEO's office or the board of directors or the county commissioners or somebody because you're going to have to justify why your position matters and why we should fund you for another 2 years or whatever. And you need to be articulating that and ready, having that speech. On my Our Earth YouTube channel, I have like 20 of these elevator speeches of me in actual elevators. They're pretty geeky. You can watch those if you want to, but make it your own voice, right? Make it your own articulation. Because you're going to be asked, especially because geospatial and spatial thinking are so, they're hard to grab. They're kind of like the sand grains between conglomerate in a column of rock or a soil sample. It's hard to grab. Spatial thinking, what is that? So you need to be able to articulate and communicate what you're doing. Okay? So I hope those are helpful. And again, I really do believe, folks, that this decade is going to be very exciting for those of you using geotechnologies and spatial thinkers, holistic thinkers. You will have a key role in achieving our desire for a more sustainable, more equitable, a more resilient world. I truly believe that. We've got a great community here at UNCA. Many of the colleagues, the networks that you're building here are going to be, they could be lifelong. So nurture those. And here's a last geo quiz for you as you ponder what questions you would like to chat about over the next few minutes. Questions, comments, concerns? Hopefully you're not texting the chancellor of the university saying this is the most horrible procession. Yes.
Regarding the AI feature extraction tool, is AI feature extraction tool building the Esri deep learning models, or do humans still need to label the imagery?
Yeah, good question. So we have some metadata on those feature extraction tools, and they take advantage of the deep learning models that we have that you've probably looked at on the esri.com, learn.arcgis.com sites. So they do use those. There's documentation. One of the concerns, though, as I mentioned, is do people read the documentation and do they understand the documentation? I fully confess some of the models that are the algorithms that are powering some of those feature extraction tools, I don't fully understand those. And I've been in GIS my whole career. So does that mean, do I not use them? Do I use them? It's sort of like, I don't understand everything on this app, but I'm going to use it because it's really valuable.
Who's
So-
building your models though? Who's building Esri's deep learning models? Because your libraries went from this to this, but
Yeah,
it's
so-
gonna go like,
It's not a isolated group of people. Part of the major philosophies of our organization is to collaborate with the scientific, the academic, nonprofit, other communities. So it's never a bunch of people over in some walled off glassed area making these things in isolation. Sometimes people, to be honest, say, hey Joseph, these GIS tools, they're advancing too rapidly. Can I slow down? I'm a faculty member. I gotta figure out how to teach with these. Or I'm a student. I want to figure out how to. I wish we could just sort of stop GIS development like in 2024. But the problem with that is that people are the wastewater community is saying, hey, we need these tools. The planning community is saying we need these tools. So we have to be, we're responding to their needs basically. So that's why GIS is advancing so rapidly, because people are demanding the tools to be there. So it's in collaboration and in conversation. And just on my own little small part of that, our development team knows that I and my teammates talk to academics, students, teachers, professors, researchers, and they ask us, and we tell them, here's what the academic community is concerned about, here's what their challenges are, here's what they need, that they're telling us. So keep that conversation going. We actually do have regular conversations with our development team. So, and just last but not least, you students out there, think about, do your homework on your organization. I'm sure your career counselors and your professors say the same thing. Esri is not, they're composed of people, so we don't always get it right. But we are always focused on education, sustainability, and science. That's been our mantra since 1969 when Esri started, which is actually older than Apple, it's older than Microsoft, it's older than Google. 1969, so there was Woodstock, this big concert in New York. Hey man, the New York State Thruway is closed. People were on the moon, and Esri started. What a great summer, oh my gosh. That is like three disparate things that happened, but it's always been focused on helping people make smarter decisions. That's why the user conference every summer, which is a big gathering of the community, is called the user conference. It's not rah rah Esri, it's what have people been doing that is making a better world. So anyway, just keep us in your mix. We love to hire wonderfully bright students like you, and we have some pretty cool locations around the world. We have an office in Charlotte, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. We actually have 2 offices there. We have an Esri office in Zurich. We have an office in Melbourne. Good on you, mates. She'll be right. And we've got some office in Beijing. We also have international distributors. So Esri East Africa, Esri Japan, Esri Malaysia, Esri Deutschland, sehr gut. Anyway, the point is, we've got some interesting offices, but also cast your net a bit wide. We have business partners that take our technology and serve the water community, serve the planning community, serve the habitat community. So there's hundreds of business partners that take our tools and serve those communities. So it's another good place to look. As well as actually the biggest area that needs people with geospatial technology skills is state and local government. So I'd be happy to chat with you about what it's like to work for a government agency. I know we've got some faculty here that have industry experience as well, government experience. I think you can make a positive difference no matter what sector of society you work in. I truly do. So I wish you all the best, folks. I'll be here, and I think we're going to go over to the Student Union and hang out. So if you want to hang out with us, you're welcome to. But live long and prosper. Map on. Thanks, folks. Much appreciated.